Students for online classes. Today we'll go on with the chapter 2, that is Indian economy ranging from 1950 to 1990. In the earlier session we had studied about the green revolution and about the subsidies. By this we completed the agricultural reforms, and today we will see about the industrial sector. So first thing, what was the situation? Majority of the people were indulged in agricultural sector. And where were the leftover people? The leftover or the minority percentage of the people were indulged in the industrial sector. So what was the industrial sector? Industrial sector was in the starting stage. So because of this, what happens, as there was no proper time or as there was no proper people indulged in industrial sector, there was no proper development. So the industrial sector was in the developing stage. So in the developing stage, the people had to decide which kind of sectors, that is whether to privatize the economy or to give the controllance to the government. So first, while thinking about the growth or the development, there was a debate or there was a problem in deciding about the privatization or about the government rule. So what basically they thought that what will the private sector do? Private sector or the private organization is mainly about the profit making area, or the decisions or all the things is done basically to increase or improve their own sector or their own internal things, but they won't keep upon or they will not think about the welfare of the economy. So because of this, what happened, there was decrease in the controllance given to private sector, and in spite of that there was increase in the government control. So when I take 100 percentage into consideration, what happens, 51 percentage of the control was given to the government, and the leftover 49 percentage or the minority percentage was given to the private people. So first, let's see the public sector. How did it help to the industrial development? First was the lack of capital. So it is very much necessary so that a particular institution or a particular industry must have capital to invest in. When you invest something, you get something in return. So at this particular point of time, what happened, there was no proper financial security or financial facility given to the end people when it came under the public sector, or the development which could be made or the involvement of public sector which even helped in increasing the money structure, something like that, nothing was there. So because of that, what happened, public sector had to come into picture, and the government, or when the revenue increases to government, it will be helpful for the end customer or the end people or the public. By this, what happened, the development could be made. Second one is lack of incentive. So here I compare the private sector to the public sector. So what happens, first, what does the incentive mean? Incentive is the financial facility or the financial security which will be given to any kinds of sectors. Okay, what used to happen in industrial sector, as our country is developing, so when it is in developing stage, what is very much necessary, monetary structure is very much necessary to invest in any kinds of place. So how the incentive will be given, I'll give you an example. So when I come to the construction of roads, what happens, if the contract is given for the private sectors, then what is necessary, then it will when you invest something, you need something in return. So at this particular point of time, what will private people think, I have invested 10 crore in construction of this road, so because of this I need some percentage of profit. So when I take 10% 10 percentage into profit, so I need some percentage. So the recovery will be made, or the result which will be made, which will be of many years, the longer period of time which will be taken for the 10 crore. So because of this, what happens, the hike in the toll tax or any kinds of duties which you do when transporting things or when you travel from one place to another, this duties or this taxes will increase, which will be affected to the public. So because because of this, what happens when public will indulge in all these kinds of matters, there will be a less percentage of the taxes, or there will be less percentage of toll tax or any kinds of duties will be taken when it is compared to private and public. So public is very much necessary for the development of industrial process. And even the next thing is a social justice. So what does this social justice mean? The private sector only aims at the maximization of profit. So what will happen? So there will be a discrimination between the classes in the society. So how there will be discrimination in the classes, how there will be social injustice to the people. So I will give you example. When I come to the PDS, that is public distribution system. So what does this mean? This is giving the food grains at a lower rate by the government to the end people, which is the current situation. So when the private people do this thing, what will be the scenario? And when the government people will do, what will be the scenario? As told earlier, private people is mostly about the profit making. So they will not keep, nowadays what is the rice or the paddy given to the end consumers at low rate, that is at rupee 1. What happens, the rice is given to the consumers or to the public under below poverty line cards. Okay, so when it comes to the private organization, when private people take upon all these necessary things, what will happen? So when the thinking is of profit making, what will happen? There will be no sufficient food given to the end consumers, and only the people who give high money, or the people who give more money, only they will be concentrated at this point of time, when private thing will be, or the private sector will be in the economy. But when we come to the government sector, or when we come to the public sector, which is the main thing, welfare of the people or the nation's security is kept as the national priority, and doing all the things in accordingly. So social justice will be kept at its peak when only public sector will come and do all the controlling things of the any kinds of, maybe when it comes to PDS, or maybe when it comes to any other sectors or any other kinds of industrial work. So by this, by the justice thing, what happens, it even develops the economy, the public sector, it even grows or helps in the growth of the economy. And lastly, the development of infrastructure. As told earlier in the incentive, what happens, uh, first let's know what is infrastructure. Infrastructure is maybe the building up of roads, or any kinds of facility, maybe for irrigation, maybe any kinds of dams, that things are known as the infrastructure. So what happens when public will come into picture? Public will not take so much money, or the public sector will not take, or the public sector will only think about the development of the economy. At this point of time, what happens, the roads is very much necessary for the transportation process. So what happens when it comes to the private sector or the private thing, what happens, they think about the money, and when it comes to any kinds of taxes or duties, there will be a hike. So this is, private sector will be a negative impact to the development of industrial process. And the examples for the public sector is the this Bharat Heavy Electronics Limited, and many n number of facilities or n number of industries is being situated under the industrial sector. So this was about the public sector. When we compare to the private sector, public sector is much more easier or much more helper to the industrial development. Okay, so the next, the main reform we will study under the industrial sector is the Industrial Policy Revolution, that is IPR, which was introduced in the year 1956, which was adopted by our Indian Parliament in the year 1956. So what does this IPR does? Okay, first, government increases the role of public sector in the industrial development of the economy. This industrial policy resolution or revolution will help in increasing the public sector rather than increasing in the private sector in the economy. And later on, IPR formed on a basis of second 5-year plan. So the, as we studied 5-year plan in the earlier sessions, so the first 5-year plan was happened in the year 1951. So after 5 years it will be 1956. So this industrial policy resolution or revolution was taken into consideration in the second 5-year plan, which will be ranging from 1956 to 1960. Okay, so the main and the objective of this IPR is the advancement of the rate of economic growth and speeding up the industrialization as a means of achieving the socialistic pattern of the society. See, even the objective tells, even with the growth and even with the development, there will be a speedy growth in the economy, and with by taking into consideration of the socialistic pattern. What kind of socialistic pattern? That is the welfare of the economy. So under this I just want to tell, there is a difference between industries and industrialization. Industries means one industry or the situation or the setup of one industry in a one particular location. So what does industrialization mean? Industrialization means setting up of more and more industry in any one area or overall nation, in overall nation. That is known as industrialization. I repeat, industries means setting up of one industry in any one kind of location, or establishing one industry. When it comes to industrialization, it means setting up more and more industry in any kinds of area. So this was about the IPR resolution, how the objective gave the major role or speeding up of the industrialization in the our economy. So under IPR, it is classified into three main categories. So the three main categories are segregated or divided into Schedule A, Schedule B and Schedule C. So how does this particular things are being segregated? Okay, first, under Schedule A, basically, and all the sectors will, all the industries will come under the public sector, or it will come under the government. So basically 17 industries will come under Schedule A. So you might think what kind of things or what kind of industries will come. The maybe when it comes to defense, maybe when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry, the medical industry, and then the defense, the heavy machineries and the electricity, all these industries comes under the public sector or under the controllance of the government. And next, under the Schedule B, what kinds of industries will come? Both the public and private sectors. Now, how is this public and private sector? The upper hand or the dominant role will be of the public sector. Based upon the registration of the public sector gives upon the approval, based upon that the private sector can take up any kinds of industries. Only with the registration or only with the approval of public sector, what happens, the private sector can do all the necessary things. And when we come to the last schedule, that is Schedule C, only the private sector, any kinds of, maybe when it comes to the production of bottles, maybe when it comes to the production of tissues or toothpicks or any kinds of appliances, what happens, the private sector without the registration or without the approval, what they can do, they can set up their industries in any kinds of the place, any kind of location, any kind of place wherever the raw materials is available for them, or wherever the labors will be available for the industries, any kinds of place, any kind of place the industry can be situated. Okay, so now we'll study about the effects of IPR 1956. How did the IPR affected the industrial revolution? How the reforms made the industrial revolution? First, what happened? As there were many number of industries, it was very difficult for the people to keep in mind about a particular industry, in the sense to segregate whether this is public sector or whether this is private sector industry. So because of this, what happened, the government introduced a scheme, or the government introduced a new policy, that is introduction of industrial licensing. Licensing was very much important, just to segregate whether it is public based industry or the private based industry. So what happened in industrial licensing? if any kind of people wanted to open up the new industry or the continuation of the current industry or expanding the business or expanding the industry to the new, because of the upgradation of technology, what is necessary, you need to adjust to the current scenario based upon the technology. So even for the expansion of industry, what happened, the license could be taken. The license was very much important to take up in, so license was very mandatory. So the government thought of doing all the industries by giving the approval and by giving the permission. So this particular industry licensing refers to the written permission for from the government for opening up or expanding the industrial unit. I repeat the meaning of industrial licensing, that is, it refers to the written permission given from the government for opening up or expansion of the industry. Okay, so by this we got to know that which kind of industry is private and which kind of industry is public. So now we'll come on to the next thing, that is industrial concession. So what happened, all the people in the private industry were in loss. Why? Because the government didn't leave the private industry to make profit. Why? Because everything was under the permission of the government. So it was very difficult to commercialize or to buy and sell of the goods in India, even because of the tax problems. So because of this, government gave a good option, that is industrial concession. This is one of the next policy the government introduced, that is industrial concession. So what does this concession mean? Majority of the industries are built outside the country or in the border of the country. So why is it so? Because of the concessions given by the government. First, what low percentage of the income taken from the what the industrial, the permission, when the permission is being taken, what there is very much a necessary process to be taken into consideration. Maybe when it comes to transportation, maybe when it comes to the approval of any kinds of thing, what happens, it is very much necessary for you need to approve all the necessary things, where the a location of the land or the location of the industry to be situated. So what did the government do? The industry which is not inside the country, they are constructed outside the country or the border of the country. So why are these industries built outside the country? This is one of the main question. So what happened, there is a possibility of constructing inside the country, but what were the concessions given by the government? First thing what the government gave is the land for the cheaper rate. Second is the deduction in tax. Third is the reduction in the rate of electricity and the labor force, increase in the labor force. These are the concessions given by the government for the betterment of the public in the urban cities, and even for the development of the rural cities, this particular industrial concession were made. I repeat again the industrial concessions. First thing, what happened because of the loss in the private sector, what happens, because you need to take the permission with the public, so because of this the private sector were in the loss. And when the government introduced the industrial concession, what happened, only when you situate your industry in outside the country or in the border of the country, you will get the concessions. So what kind of concession did you get? You got the land for cheaper rate, there was deduction in the tax, and even the reduction in the rate of electricity, and even the increase in the labor force for the industrial sector. So this was about the industrial concession. So the next thing is about the promoting regional equality. So what happened, what does regional equality mean? Each and every regions, that is maybe when it comes to rural place and maybe when it comes to urban place, all the places in the economy should be equal. So because of this, what happened, because situation of the industries was put into the rural areas or in the village areas, because of this what happened, there will be development in the economy, there will be development in the rural area. By this what happened, there will be equality among all the sectors and all the places in our whole nation. This was about the effects of IPR 1956. Okay, the last thing under industry comes about the small scale industry. So what does small scale industry mean? The meaning of small scale industry is the industry which invest less than 1 crore rupees in the plant and machinery, which is called small scale industry. In the simple terms which I tell, that the any setuping of industry or constructing of any kinds of industry which should be less than 1 crore, that kind of industry is known as small scale industry, which was in the year 1956. Okay, now the current investment, or in the year 2019, the current investment is been, the minimum investment should be 25 lakh and the maximum investment of the small scale industry will be 5 crore. Less than 25 lakh, it will be considered as a cottage industry. Okay, so small scale industry is also known as carway committee, where the all the necessary items. So what does the small scale industry produce, or what will they do? They do any kinds of work or any kinds of production process which will be of shorter period of time, and all the necessary items, maybe the toothpick, maybe the tissues, maybe the production of bottles, all the small production process will be done under the small scale industry. And what is the main motive thing of small scale industry? It is to promote the rural development. It is to increase or to do the rural area to become a city, or development of the village area. So this is basically about the small scale industry. And the advantages of small scale industry are, first thing, creation of employment. So what happens, say what was the minimum amount for the small scale industry to invest? It was 25 lakh. So it will be even easier for the middle class people to take a loan from the bank or any kinds of financial institution and to set up a small scale industry. And by this what happens, not only one person will be employed in a particular industry, in spite of that most of the people will employed. So because of this what happens, there will be creation of employment. And the next thing is formation with small capital and simple machineries. As told, the small capital with the minimum amount of 25 lakh, you can set up any kinds of industries, that is comes under small scale industry. And what kinds of machinery? Majorly what will people do? There are two kinds of things: the labor intensive goods and the capital intensive goods. Labor intensive will be basically made with the manual work, and the capital will be basically under the machinery tools of the latest upgradation. So even with the simple machineries or even with the manual work, small scale industry will run, or it will have a good production process. So the next one is low degree of skill required. What happens under small scale industry? No much efficiency, no much skill is also not necessary in this particular industry. Why? Because only a person should be knowledgeable to run the machineries and to do the marketing things. By this what happens, it is not necessary that the skill is very much important in all kinds of industries. So in under small scale industry, the technology, or when you have a simple technology, what happens, only simple kind of knowledge or the skill is also uh, favorable to the people to do the production process. And the next thing is quick yielding. So what happens, as told earlier, it is small scale industry is of small span of time. So what happens, the production process will be of small span, so the result or the products or the items will be produced soon. So the yield or the result will get in a quick span of time, which will be, maybe when I take into consideration, maybe of 1 month I do 50,000 toothpicks. So by this what happens, within that particular span of time, the result or the items will be produced. And the last one is balanced regional development. So how there was balanced regional development? First, because of low investment. Second, because of the labor force. And because of the setting up of the industry was very much easier. So because of this what happened, the regional development happened with the development happening in the urban cities. So there was balanced development even in the urban cities and even in the rural areas because of this small scale industry. And the last thing and the small scale industry is about the problems. So what were the problems faced by the industrialists or the owner of that industry? First is the finance. So what happens when you invest something, it is very much necessary for you to get loan, or you need to have sufficient amount. So this was one of the problem. And second one, the problem of marketing. So when you buy and sell goods, you need to have some percentage of skill how to sell goods. So at this particular point of time, what happened, even the marketing thing also, even when you do marketing, you need to know the information of the market. So which kinds of goods are being demanded, which kinds of goods I need to supply. So even the marketing thing, when you have low knowledge or when you have no information available, it will be a problematic thing under the marketing process. And next thing is the competition of large scale industry. How there will be competition? The large scale industry, because of good investment, what will they do? They, because of good technology, they use a good quality products. So at this point of time, what will the small scale industry do? Because of the simple machineries use, simple technology use, the quality of the product will be not up to the mark. So because of this, the small scale industry will have a heavy or a very big competition from large scale industry. And the next thing is problem of modern technology. So what happens, when you invest only limited percentage of amount in your industry, you cannot adopt new technology or you cannot adopt new machineries. And even when you need to adopt new technology, what is necessary? The skill or the knowledge is very much necessary, which is lagging behind in small scale industry. So this is also one of the problem. And lastly, what happens, lack of availability of raw materials. So what happens, in some point of time, small scale industry will produce whatever things they need, whatever raw materials they need. At the same point of time, when you have competition with the large scale industries, what happens, large scale industry will buy all the raw materials from the market. At this point of time, what happens, there will be no raw materials left over for the small scale industry to buy or to do the production process. So these are all the problems which are being facing by the small scale industry, which is one of the negative thing for the small scale industry. Okay, so the assignment part is, what is the objective of industrial policy resolution, that is IPR 1956. And the next question is, give the meaning and importance of small scale industry. Thank you, students.